create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
There's going to be a revolution. It's totally going to happen.
A new world order.
History is leading toward the transformation of this planet in our lifetime.
Hello, you are listening to Themes and Memes, a different kind of movie review. My name is Adam, my website is cerebralrevolt.com, here with my co-host Aaron of theageoftransitions.com. How are you doing today, Aaron?
Oh, I'm doing very good, and I'm excited to continue our conversation about the movie Elysium, because today we're deciding to delve into the more occult and esoteric themes that are brought up in this movie, of which there are many. So,
indeed.
Off the bat, do you have any that popped out to you?
Well, I mean, where do we start? You know, there's a whole. I mean, obviously, if people will have hopefully listened to the first hour by now, and obviously in the first hour we talked about I guess some of the more
mundane,
practical, tangible aspects of the film. But I think what we're going to be talking about in the second hour is more of the intangible, some of the more symbolically inclined content, the more of the subjective, some metaphysical concepts and constructs, and talking about the mythological tie-ins and the philosophical tie-ins and all the sort of esoteric depth that this film has to it, because there's a lot there. And I think most of it, to me, and I think people who have seen the film and who know about this stuff, and I think you yourself will probably agree that most of the mythology or the mythological sort of themes in this film revolve around Greek mythology, or at least Greco-Roman mythology, and the religions, cults, and mystery schools of that day. The most obvious of being the name Elysium, because in Greek mythology and in Greek certain Greek cults and sects, Elysium was seen as basically the version of heaven. It was the place where righteous souls would go to die, would go after they had died, or had go as a gift from the gods. People who were the best and the brightest. The heroes, the soldiers, the elite. The so-called elite, anyway. Those who had achieved greatness on earth, those who had ascended, those who had done great things, those who were worthy of joining the gods, would go to the fields. They used to refer to the fields of Elysium.
The Elysian fields, yes.
The Elysian fields,
Same thing.
Being a sort of a paradise for those who had achieved well on earth and who had done well for themselves. And so we literally have a literal version of that having been constructed. We have a heaven, and basically a heaven being constructed by man. Being constructed by the elite of human society for themselves. They actually realized
it's within the heavens of space.
Yeah, it's within the heavens, exactly. Yeah.
With the stars.
So I think most of the sort of the symbolic and esoteric content in the film revolves around that type of Greek mythology, and there's plenty of little examples that we can cite throughout the conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
That lend credence toward that idea. So, I mean, what sort of things did you notice, Aaron, in that vein?
Well, absolutely. I'm glad that you mentioned Greek mythology, and we'll point out a lot of those. I think to begin with, I'd like to mention language, and you've got the Greek language here, and you've also got the Latin language. So I think they are hearkening back to ancient Greece and classical civilization, and specifically Rome here, because in the Roman Empire, the official language was Latin. So all the people spoke Latin. However, the elites within Roman society spoke Greek. The educated intellectual elites spoke Greek. And their whole civilization was based on the past Greek civilization. It was modeled on that, and even all their mythology was just copied and altered through name only, really. So you've got this. They're definitely showing you the Roman elite system, and they're equating that to today's world, where that you have Elysium being the home of the elite in modern day, and the people speak a certain language, being English, really. But you have the people, the masses, speaking Spanish, because down on Earth in Los Angeles, you find that Spanish really is the official language of the
predominantly,
people.
At least, yeah.
It seems to be, yeah. So it's the same sort of thing going on with the language, the Greek and the Latin. And I'll note that Spanish is a Latin language, so that connects to the Roman Latin language for the masses, and then the Greek is for the educated elite. Again, they're living on Elysium, so that kind of happens there. Yeah.
And it also sort of it's also making the suggestion that, of course, that these aren't really just the greedy psychopathic corporatists who've literally slaughtered and murdered and scammed and conspired their way to the top, which is predominantly the case today in our society. But through this mythological tie-in, suggesting that no, actually these people deserve to be there. They actually, have reached almost, a higher level of being. They've reached Elysium through their good deeds. So what they're doing is really equating, financial and corporate success and material success with, and of course the power that comes with that success. They're actually equating that to some form of spiritual ascension. If you really think about it, and the spiritual ascension has actually been created by those people through technological means. So they've created their own version of heaven, quite literally.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's very interesting.
Another point from Greek mythology, classical mythology here, that I noticed was one of the first times that you see the regenerating medical table thing that everybody has in their home on Elysium. There was an emblem on the side of it that was Medusa's head.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So you see Medusa's head on the table from the very beginning there, and there's a lot going on with symbolism of this. This ties into the theme of decapitation, which I mentioned on the previous podcast. There's a theme of decapitation here, but also with Medusa, it's okay. So it's that age-old female divine mother character in Medusa. You've got the female with the serpents coming out of her head. So the serpents symbolizing knowledge and wisdom, mostly intellectual knowledge.
Mostly,
And this ties into the same Old Testament myth of Eve being tempted by the serpent, so the same
tempted
serpent.
By knowledge,
tempted by knowledge. And of course, this healing technology is the outcome of that quest for knowledge, and the taking the forbidden fruit. It's all the same thing. So
the quest for immortality as well, because that's what. That's what these machines essentially do. Is they make you immortal, they make you ageless, which is what the whole mythological idea of Elysium was. It was the afterlife. It was the place where you would become immortal and you would never die. You would live on forever, and that's exactly what these machines allow for the elite in Elysium. They allow them to live on forever.
Yep.
So it's a direct tie-in. It's a technological representation of that mythology down to its exact, down to its exact theme. So
and obviously Medusa ties into the classical Greek mythology idea, but also to this idea that has come all the way through the centuries of man's quest for knowledge, his fall, and the whole deal there, the taking of the forbidden fruit. It's all the same story. That's an important point to make, is that many of the myths from different cultures are representing the same concepts, because they're the most important concepts that relate to human civilization, really, and the development of human civilization beyond just man living within the confines of the natural world without tools.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, there's so many little nods, to Greek mythology within this film that it would take hours to list them all off. I mean, it's hard to know where to go, but I mean, even just small things that I picked up on, which were quite interesting. For example, we talked about the character Kruger, the hitman, the assassin, in the previous hour that we did on this, and he's basically employed by the Elysium government on a sort of a covert black ops basis, and is supplied with military craft, that not only is used to transport himself, to and from the station, but also to, run, operations on Earth, paramilitary operations, and is also used to surveil. And they call this particular craft that he is operating in, and him and his team of commandos, they call it the Raven. And it's interesting because in Greek mythology, there's a bit of significance there with the Raven, because there's that old legend of Apollo, where Apollo basically at some point employed a white bird to basically be his spy, because he suspected that his lover, I can't remember if I'm getting the myth correct or not, but I think he was basically using this bird to spy on his lover, who was another god. Because he suspected that she was, betraying him and was in love with someone else, perhaps a mortal even, I think, from memory. But anyway, he used this white bird as a spy, as a surveillance device. And eventually, when the bird returned to Apollo, so according to Greek mythology, and told him that, yes, in fact, your suspicions were correct, your lover has been cheating on you, Apollo, the sun god, flew into a rage and scorched the bird black. And so this white bird became black and became the Raven, and that in Greek mythology, that's where the Raven comes from, is from Apollo scorching it in his rage. And so you've got the whole idea of this craft being a surveillance device, and of also having, ever since, the legend of Apollo, the Raven has become a symbol of death and destruction in many different cultures and religions, and other sort of traditions, metaphysical traditions at least, the Raven is often viewed as a symbol of kind of a harbinger almost, of death or of destruction or of bad things, basically.
It's definitely the Raven, and just all blackbirds like crows and all that are
crows and blackbirds,
death symbols, and that's definitely true.
Death symbols, yeah,
absolutely. That's very prevalent in alchemy, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And so you've got the idea of this, the assassins, using this craft called a Raven, and again, the tie-in with surveillance, because there's quite a focus on throughout the film with this craft having high surveillance technology and having a whole fleet of drones that it can send out and spy on people, and it's the Raven that manages to eventually find the sort of fugitive Matt Damon who's trying to evade them, and they eventually find him with the drones of this Raven. So it's almost like a replay of the story of Apollo again, and in some ways.
And Apollo is the sun god, and there's also lots of sun god and hero symbolism going on in this film too.
Yeah, what type of things did you notice in terms of the sun god type archetypes?
They had Matt Damon obviously playing the hero. He was embodying the hero archetype, quite obviously. But more than that, the sun god. The sun god is always the hero archetype.
Yeah.
It's the Hercules, Jesus, all of these various characters who embody the sun and the solar power.
Yeah, the power of the sun, the solar power. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we talked about that in Cloud Atlas as well. And this is one of these themes that keeps coming up again and again. Throughout history and even in the present day. The symbolism of the sun, especially behind somebody's head.
Yes.
like Jesus and the halo, and so many other examples. Yeah.
What's interesting in this movie is Matt Damon, while he's at work in the factory. The Max character in this, one way that they show him as a hero, and specifically the sun god hero, the hero that has the power of the sun within him, I think is seen when he has his accident at work. He's working in the factory and goes in the machine, and he ends up getting irradiated. So he gets this lethal dose of radiation, and that's what sets him on the course of action throughout the movie. But just the fact that it's radiation that is infused him. I mean, that's what the sun is. It emits...
It's radiation, yeah.
Yeah, it emits radiation. That's its power, which is the power that gives life to the planet, but it's also an extremely strong power that can also be dangerous too.
Well, it just depends on the frequency of the radiation. I mean, a radio frequency is radiation, but it's not necessarily damaging. It can carry information, but it depends on the frequency. Like, anything upwards of the gigahertz or the terahertz, can be extremely damaging to you. So it depends on the frequency of the radiation. So it's not a bad or a good thing.
Yeah.
But
well, there's definitely. I mean, he could have been crushed by a machine and had a machine arm replaced with his old arm or something like that. But they chose him to be poisoned by radiation. I think that was specific because he's the sun hero character. I think they did that on purpose. Yeah. And
there's also the sort of the tie-in with the whole idea of Apollo as well, being the sort of the Greek god and the sun god, and his boss, the CEO of Armadine Corp, possibly representing something along the lines of Apollo and scorching him. As I sort of mentioned, there's back to when we were talking about the whole idea of the Raven. I mean, I'm not sure if there's anything to that. I mean, maybe I'm way off there. Maybe I think your interpretation of that's probably closer to what they wanted to get across. But there are multiple ways you can interpret that, and I think there are different many levels of significance there, possibly.
Well, the character Kruger, who pilots the Raven, or he comes from the Raven at least, in their battle scene between the Max character, Matt Damon, and Kruger, this final showdown that they have, the bad guy Kruger tells Max, he says to him, "You've got some fire in you, boy." So he says, "You've got some fire in you." So there it is. He's got fire in him because he is the hero. He's the sun god. He's got the radiation in him, right? That's why he's dying. He's got fire in him. So I think that's what that was about.
And of course, what always happens with the sun god? The sun god must be sacrificed.
Correct. Yep.
Exactly. Yep. And that's exactly what happens, because if people have watched the film, will know that. And I'll just explain this. What happens is, as we explained in the first hour, he does this data heist. That's what they call it. He downloads the information from the CEO of Armadine Corp's brain chip into his own brain chip. However, what's happened is that the CEO has basically encoded this information lethally, basically, so that whenever it is activated or downloaded, it actually kills the person who basically is feeding that data back into the computer. So if you have this information in your head, once you actually access it and once you actually put it into action and then do the whole reboot sequence, which was the whole revolutionary concept or revolutionary act in the movie, the actual person who holds that information dies. So you've got the whole idea of the sun god, Matt Damon, sacrificing himself for the greater good, so to speak, which is the classic hero archetype,
You know what's interesting? Even, the Jesus character embodying the hero, the solar hero, it's this idea of this solar power, which is kind of a spiritual power that's beyond the material even, infused into a material vessel being the human body. And the human body, and in so doing, carrying this spiritual fire power, that hero enlightens the world and saves the world. But the fire is so strong, it's such a potent force that the material world can't hold it in without it burning up the material. So that's the whole idea of the hero having to be sacrificed, because he has this spiritual power that is too much for the world even. So
yeah, that's right, and it's he's told by like a Catholic nun at the beginning of the film. It shows him growing up in this, like a favela, like a destitute, neighborhood in Los Angeles. It shows him growing up with this Hispanic Catholic nun. And she's basically explaining to him that you may not make it to Elysium, but you're very special. You're destined for something great. and you've got something very special within you, so that you have that whole idea of him, having the fire inside of him and being a special person, and you notice throughout the film he keeps on saying the same thing. He's like, I'm not going to die from this. I'm not going to die. I'm going to survive. So it's like that fire again. It's that I'm not going to let them beat me. I'm going to keep going, even though he does perform the ultimate sacrifice in the end for the greater good. Apparently, he's still got that whole idea is presented to you over and over again of he's not going to be taken down. He's not going to be stopped. He's going to stop at nothing to achieve his goals. He's going to do it. He's got the fire.
The solar power of Leo. A lot of the esoteric interpretations of the Leo zodiac sign. It's all about that. It's all those qualities of you have that ambition that cannot be stopped. You have the fire in you to achieve anything. Yeah, courage.
And of course, we could go into the symbolism of Leo, the lion, the sun, and how the lion has always been associated with the sun and esoteric mythology. But that's
something else that's important with Matt Damon's character is his name is Max. So this is a Greek name. It's I'm assuming it's short for Maximus. It could be Maximilian.
Maximus, that's right. Yeah,
Maximus. Clearly a Greek name. So here, not only do we get the tie back to the Greek language, classical society, and the fact that his name is a Greek one would equate Matt Damon's character with the elite. So he's obviously, being the son hero character, he's an elite person, even though he comes from humble beginnings, just like all heroes do. They come from the humble beginnings and then they rise up. But also with Max, another movie, Gladiator.
Gladiator.
Yeah,
Maximus.
That was Maximus too. Same name, same character, same hero archetype.
Humble. Well, he's a general, so maybe not so. We don't know what his beginnings were, but he makes the ultimate sacrifice in the end.
And he's saving the people. He saves
the people. Yeah, exactly.
It's always about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's all about the hero dying for the sins, or dying for the betterment of all mankind who are
just like you
slaves.
and the Matrix. Mm-hmm. Yep. And basically every other film that has a hero.
Yeah, it's always the same thing.
It's the same archetype, that they say that this is like, if you go to film school or anything like that, they'll tell you that this is the plot device that you have to use if you want to make a successful, film. The hero must always die.
It's time tested. It comes from way back in ancient times. Yeah.
Hero must always make the ultimate sacrifice at the end of the story, at the end of the saga. The hero must always sacrifice himself for the greater good. It's like a rule in film and in drama and fiction. And it has been for so long now. At least since Christian times, and then probably before as well. For the whole idea of the different sun god and sun cults that existed beforehand, but most especially with the Jesus figure. So yeah,
absolutely,
definitely put theme.
Yeah, and then I guess it's good to return to the whole Greek and Latin language thing, and you've got the concept of Rome tying in here. We see in this film, Los Angeles is the main setting, really. Los Angeles is where the masses who are slaves are living. They live on Earth in Los Angeles, and then we have the elite living up on Elysium. And of course, there's the language gap, with Spanish being the language of the slaves and then English being the language of the elite, similar to the language divide in Rome. However, with the setting, I think they're doing the same thing with the setting here, because to me, LA, okay, we get LA as where the slaves are, but Elysium itself looks like LA does today, like the nice parts of LA. It looks like your Beverly Hills area. Even the very look of it, like it looks like LA to me. I look at it and it's like, oh, that ship is coming into LA, or coming into Beverly Hills rather. And then even the Earth part of LA, there are parts of LA that pretty much already do look like that. Maybe not quite, but it's getting close. Like the social stratification there is ridiculous. I mean, you'll have like the fanciest neighborhood with multi-million-dollar houses, and then you go a couple blocks down the street, and it's like it's almost as if you're in a third world country. Not quite, but it's just like so run down and like utter poverty, people in the streets, like living in the streets. Like it's crazy there. But I think they were playing to that with this film.
It's funny that they didn't actually do a lot of the shooting in LA. They actually chose Mexico City for a lot of the shooting, and it's funny because I mentioned that in the first interview that we did on this the first hour that LA has a kind of a Mexico City look to it, and it does actually turn out that they did actually do a lot of the filming for those scenes in Mexico City. Which is obviously a lot less glamorous and a lot more third world looking than LA as a whole generally.
Yes.
And the Elysian sort of field, so to speak, these lovely parks and and swimming pools and lakes and streams and sort of gardens and mansions that the basically constitute the habitat ring of this big Elysium structure. That was actually shot in Vancouver. So it's funny that you make these comparisons, yet they chose to actually not film it predominantly in LA, at least anyway. And I'm sure some of the scenes were shot in LA, but it's funny, but they didn't actually do that. They actually chose different locations.
Well, they're probably playing to just the whole divide between Mexico and California too, and the whole idea of people coming from Mexico to here, and that's quite clear with the. I mean, they clearly depict that with the people flying in the ships trying to come up to Elysium and jump the border and things like that. It's very obvious in that regard what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's like what we mentioned before. It's like the Mexicans jumping the border so they can get Obamacare. It's the same sort of allegory. And I mean, it's no coincidence that all these people who are trying to get up to Elysium happen to be like of Hispanic descent and who speak Spanish.
Yeah.
Well, this is no coincidence at all. This is a play on a current political or socio-political issue. So I don't think that the fact that it's based in LA and that it's all about border jumping and healthcare and stuff like that was done arbitrarily. And as I said again in the first hour, the director Neill Blomkamp said, "This isn't about the future. This is about right now." So
absolutely.
Yeah,
that was fairly obvious to me. But there's so many. I think they did good, at least in terms with the language, with the Spanish and English and the Greek and the Latin and all those sorts of connections there are definitely purposeful, if you ask me.
Yeah, well, that's just too many of them. I mean, if you saw maybe one or two, you might think, oh well, maybe they just put that in there because it happened to work well with what they were trying to do, or it happened to work well with the script, or it happened to work well sort of in terms of the shooting locations or the weather or whatever it was. But it's just there's too much of it for anyone to really seriously say that this has just been done arbitrarily. Mm-hmm. This has been done very deliberately because it's just constantly referencing the same types of ideas, and not just in terms of the more tangible aspects that we covered in the first hour, but in terms of the esoteric Greek mythology that we're sort of talking about now, and we've talked about in this section here. I mean, it's there's so many little details that relate directly back to Greek mythology that there's no question about it having been done deliberately, to me anyway. Yeah,
well, as we said, there was the Medusa's head that we were talking about before. That was clearly on the healing machine, whatever you want to call that thing. And with Medusa, I keep mentioning this theme of decapitation. I think I want to talk a little bit more about it now. But Medusa obviously comes with the theme of decapitation because you have, as the myth goes, the Athenian hero, again, another hero character, Perseus, who decapitates Medusa, and then he takes her head because her head, anybody who stares at her face will turn to stone, so it's his power.
Stone, yeah.
So he uses the power of her decapitated head to kill this other large beast, the Kraken or whatever. So we've got decapitation there, and I've read from somebody saying that the whole decapitation myth there with Perseus and Medusa has to do with the taking of a certain interpretation of the mother goddess, like the divine feminine principle embodied in a specific character, in this case Medusa, and it was taken from one past culture, I think either from Greece to Rome or an even earlier culture to Greece. I forget how it goes exactly, but taking this female character from mythology and reinventing it. And actually, in reinventing it, Medusa becomes evil. And before, she wasn't so much evil, but she became more evil for a certain reason. So decapitation can mean taking an idea from the past and reusing it, actually, which is kind of interesting to note.
Yeah. I guess I probably didn't pick up on that as much as you did, but I definitely picked up on that. I think the first scene of decapitation that we see in the film is sort of fairly early towards the beginning of the film, where Matt Damon first gets his exoskeleton fitted, and he does this hijacking, this data heist on his the CEO of Armadine Corp. They bring his ship down and do the brain chip plug-in thing. And, of course, his armed droids come out and try and fight them off. But because Matt Damon's got the exoskeleton, he gets into a battle with one of these things, and he decapitates it. He rips its head off.
He rips its head off. And to me, that was done purposely, because he could have killed it anyway, but the way it was depicted and the way he grabs its head and he pulls it off, it's all dramatic. It's like they made him pull the head of the machine off for a reason.
And the thing is, what I found about that is this if you look at the way the robot moves and how technologically advanced it is in terms of its close combat skills. I mean, this robot it's floundering. It's basically just waving its hands all over the place as its head's getting ripped off.
It's silly.
It's supposed to be a robot. If this robot really is as powerful as it's being depicted in all the other scenes, it's just simply going to turn around and fight back. It's not just going to lie there on its back, waving its arms around, going, "Oh, please don't decapitate me, please stop." So I mean, it's obviously done deliberately.
Yeah. It was a bit silly, but in the silliness, we also saw the fact that it was deliberate, and that he decapitated it as opposed to just smashing it or whatever. There was a reason, I think, in doing that. I guess another example of decapitation would be when Max and Kruger again are fighting before their final showdown. They're in the ship, and I think Max throws a bomb his way or something, and the bomb basically ends up blowing his head up, Kruger's head up, blows his face off. I don't know if that's decapitation proper, but to me
it's
that's
the same
still
kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's in the same vein. There's no question about it. And as we described in the first hour, because he has access to the Elysium healthcare, he literally has his face reconstructed in 30 seconds. So he's okay, because his brain is still functional behind this massive worm. Because he's missing his mouth, he's missing his nose and half his face, but his brain's still functional. So all they have to do is just dump him in this machine, and it literally reconstructs his face and jump starts his heart again. In the space of 30 seconds, and it's like he's reborn, So, I would. It's as you said. It's not like it's a literal decapitation, but it's in the same vein. You know?
And then during their final showdown, Kruger is coming at Max and he says, "I'm going to rip your head off, boy." So
that's right. Yeah,
that's what he's going to do to him. He's going to rip his head off now, but he never does. But that's his goal is to rip the head off of the hero. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, to rip the head off the hero. That's correct. Yeah, and that goes back to so much history and so much mythology and so much. If you look into military conflict and all that stuff and way back, again and again and again, the head has always been a sort of a sick prize, for the victor of a war.
You
behead
put
the
it
king,
up on a
you behead
stake.
the soldier. They put it up on a stake, as a kind of a warning to others, and B as a kind of a gift to the other faction or to the winning side, who say, hey, look, we've brought you back the other king's head, so that might use as symbols you've won.
That might even tie back to the symbolism of Medusa, is you take this old myth that gave meaning to the past culture, and then you cut the head, the allegorical head off of that myth, and you hold it up for your culture, in this case Athens, to behold for a whole different reason. And it's like, look, we defeated this old culture, we've taken over, this is our new interpretation of it. I think that's what's kind of going on with the whole Medusa decapitation thing.
Yeah, you could be right. You could be right. As I said, I probably hadn't thought about that as much as you had, but I think there might be something to that because, again, that has not been done arbitrarily. Once again, directly referencing Greek mythology when they're putting the symbol or something that symbolizes Medusa's head on one of these. What is it again? It's
the regeneration machine. Yeah, the medical
the biopod thing. Yeah. So it's again, it's just so many different tie-ins here, and we could go on forever just listing tiny little ones off forever. But I think what we're trying to get across to the audience here is the significance of not only just the tangible aspects that we discussed in the first hour in terms of predictive programming and of political and geopolitical and social and cultural issues that are actually predicted to happen in the future, but also the fact that this has been compared to like a previous empire and a previous religion, and almost the rebirth of that empire and that religion, in a new form, a technological form. So, it's got so much significance on so many different levels.
And you know what? What's funny is the technology is in the head of Max, right? Because he has the brain chip thing. It's in his head. So thus the decapitation thing kind of ties into that. The whole everything is in your head sort of concept.
That's right, and it's kind of silly as well. We go back to the decapitation of the robot. Once he rips the head off, the robot just dies. It just drops down limp, and it's like, okay. I mean, if you're going to build a robot, would you really put like the whole computer in its head? I mean, if you're going to design something, would you put something in like the area that can be most easily like just taken off or snapped off? Why would you do that? Why would you make it like a human being and make it so that it could be destroyed simply by decapitation?
Yeah, because the machine's brain could be at the very core, at the center, exactly. Like covered with some sort of armor or something.
Exactly. Why would they do that? So they obviously did that for a reason too. So it ties the whole decapitation theme again, which is done very deliberately. So I mean, what exactly we can make of this whole thing, the decapitation theme, I'm not sure. I think maybe you have more ideas than I do on this one, but I mean, it's definitely there. There's no question about it whatsoever, and it definitely ties into a lot of other things. So it's relevant.
Yeah, I don't know. Just the whole idea of a brain implant and all of that. The fact that the head is just so symbolic anyway. It's where the crown chakra is, so it's like the highest, most spiritual chakra area. And this is the area where Matt Damon, the hero character, has had this technology implanted into him. So it's in a spiritual temple. The skull is...
The skull is the temple,
yeah. The skull is a temple. So I think they're playing to that whole aspect.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different things they're playing to here, and it's almost difficult to try and prioritize them actually and then list them off because there's so many of these little things, and as I said, we could literally just go on forever just listing like one little thing here and one little thing there and trying to make sense of it. But I think if people look at it on the whole, I think they'll see something very significant. So it really is. I mean, I see this film as being like, so it's almost like the film we did a couple of months ago, Cloud Atlas.
Yes.
Every time you watch it, you're going to get something new out of it. I think there's that much depth to it.
Yeah.
So many levels of interpretation on so many different ways. Technological, sociological, political, philosophical, spiritual. Metaphysical, theoretical. Historical. Religious, cultural, cult-like. You name it. It's all in this film. It's really quite incredible that they managed to pack all of that into something that only lasts for like just over 1.5 hours or whatever it is.
I get the feeling that I missed a lot of like little cryptic things and details that they added in there because I feel a lot of that probably I just missed it. I know that
you will.
Yeah, there must be tons of them.
There are tons of them, and I've watched the film 3 times now, and every time I see it, I pick up something new. And it's just like The Matrix. Every time you see it, you'll pick up something new if you're paying attention. So, I mean, it will take, at least 2 sittings or at least 3 sittings to pick up on these little things. And, it's like some of the stuff I've said tonight, I didn't even notice the first time around at all. Or, so
One thing, I don't know if I'm even remembering this right, it is a problem, but I know that on the bottom of the Raven spacecraft, it had a number that popped out at me. I think it was 0302. It might have been 03021, but I just saw 0302, and to me, that would be backwards 2030, which would be a year of importance for transhumanism
exactly.
and things like that. I don't know if that was it or what.
Well, yeah, that could be. I mean, as we keep saying this, like in these reports, like from both the DCDC for the UK military and NATO and the National Intelligence Council, these two dates just keep popping up over again and again, 2030 and 2050. Well, they actually say 2036, but the National Intelligence Council says 2030. But, that kind of area, that period of time just keeps popping up over again and again. And I mean, even like Bob Geldof was doing some speech at some concert recently, and he even made reference to this thing, and I was talking to Thomas Sheridan earlier on, and he was talking about how Bob Geldof had basically made this speech saying how the world is going to be such a different place by 2030, and how everything will have changed, and he used the whole he went into the whole overpopulation and climate and resources and all the rest of the usual stuff that they get these parrots, these puppets to spiel out on when they're on stage. But he did mention that very specifically. The year 2030.
I've definitely noticed that year pop up again and again. So for what it's worth, they're repeating it for some reason. I don't know how this got to be so important of a year, but it's become a talking point, that year in itself.
Yeah, among intelligence circles, military circles, and and political, and these quangos like Geldof and all the rest of them as well. Even these dates just keep on popping up again and again, and we've got 2030 and 2050, and for some reason, Elysium is set in 2154, but I think that's basically just to neutralize the viewer and basically to make them think, oh well, if that happens, I'll be long gone, I'll be dead, so I don't have to worry about it. This is not going to happen in my lifetime. So it's that, if it happens, it'll be too far in the future, and it's out of my control, and I don't have to worry about it.
Exactly.
When actually, you're being shown this because, you or your children will both experience this in your own lifetime. They wouldn't show it to you otherwise,
Yeah. Well, 2154, I don't know. I feel that they're probably trying to make some point with that, too. It's like it's 2154 contains every digit. It's 1, 2, 4, 5, so it's like you're counting to 5, but you're missing the 3. I don't know if that has any significance, but let's see here, 2154. That equals 9 if you add up all the digits, right? I think it equals 9.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
There could be some significance there, and when you start playing around with numbers, you can come up with just about anything.
That's the problem with numerology. I think it's I think it is something that is taken seriously by a lot of people, important people.
Well,
however, the interpretation of it gets too.
It's too vague and ambiguous as to what the significance is, because I mean, again, I agree with you. I think that certain elite groups do take their numerology very, very seriously, and I think we've seen this in multiple cases in certain events over the years, but and certain sort of rituals and things like that. But when you actually get down to trying to take dates or numbers or things like that and play around with them and times them, divide them and match them and and all this kind of stuff, it just becomes so subjective and so messy and ambiguous that it's not really useful information anymore. It just becomes you can basically turn any number into anything you want if you times it and divide it and subtract it and to the power of enough times you can turn it into whatever you like. So
I've often wondered if the Pythagorean cult had, if Pythagoras used mathematics and geometry and all this as a way to kind of control
the masses.
And even control his cult members. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. But I believe that was the beginning of the whole the whole growth of the lionization and the worship of science. And
and they held up mathematics as like this thing that is to be revered, as if it is a god, and it's something
a god, basically. I see that period of time, and especially with the various the most famous philosophers of the Greco-Roman societies, would always hold up science, maybe not so much in later Rome, but in the earlier Greco-Roman societies, and especially in Greece as well, they would always hold up these mathematical and physical, basic physical, like basic understanding of physics as being God, like being the ultimate knowledge, as being our step towards being one with the divine, and our step towards becoming gods ourselves. And so I think it all started back then, and I think the language. And I think the numerology was, the whole Pythagorean cult and all the rest of it, and all the numerology that's involved in that, I think was, like so many other things, was basically just designed to confuse the average person and confound them and just get them to, turn their brains to mush, trying to figure out what all this meant. And using, a lot of esoteric stuff like, algebra and all the rest of it, just to confuse people and just to, make them think, oh, well, this stuff is all too complicated for me. I'm not going to bother trying to figure it out. These people are obviously smarter than me because they're studying stuff I don't understand. Therefore, I'm just going to give up and let them make the decisions for me. So I think that was the beginning of that. Yeah.
That would keep real important occulted information, which is strategic information you want people to know within the certain sects of the cult. Within, you keep it confined and you keep people away through those methods, in that they don't think they could decode it to begin with, and you kind of get them looking at the wrong thing anyway. So I don't know, lot to think about.
Well, they still do it with the Vatican today. I mean, it's like I think it was Alan Watt who pointed this out really well once. He said that this is what they do whenever they establish a new system of understanding the world, like such as science and the scientific method. The first thing that they would do, the elite class, so to speak, they'll create their own language so that they can cut off outsiders and stop them from getting in on the real secrets and the real knowledge. And it's like we can still see a remnant of that today in the way that the Pope speaks, because he will basically address a mass audience, thousands and thousands of people. And no one bloody speaks Latin. No one understands what he's talking about. These people speak Italian, or they speak Greek, or whatever. From whatever part of the Europe they're in. 90% of them, apart from the inner Jesuit priest class, don't know how to speak Latin, and yet he will address an entire audience in Latin, and it just confounds people. It makes them feel like, oh my God, this guy is so holy, he's so special. He knows this language that we don't understand, and he must be like a god to be able to speak like this, and when we can't. So it turns him into an authority figure, and so we've got that parallel there as well.
It's all about cipher and code cipher. It's intelligence techniques is what it is. It's pretty simple. Cryptography. Yeah.
When it comes down to it, it's basically what it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's all about It's all about hiding information in intelligence. So you encrypt it.
You encrypt it, yeah, exactly, and often you hide it in plain sight, just by speaking in a different language, making people think that they're too stupid to understand, and for that reason they won't investigate any further. They won't even bother trying to understand what you're saying. They will just accept you as an authority figure and will do everything that you tell them to do. And there are even some parallels if people want to look into it, into that concept that I've just described, and many of the themes in Elysium as well. I think they're a little bit too sort of subtly presented, and sort of convoluted to really go into now. But if you wanted to just think about that concept and then watch the movie again, I think they might find something quite interesting there. Yeah. So that's all I'll say for now on that subject. But
sure. Well, there was one little cipher that I may be way off the mark with this, but I want to make a note of it. In the very beginning of the movie, the very beginning, before the even opening credits here, where you see the production company names, like movie such and such production, one of the production companies was MRC, and that kind of, to me, that sounds like it sounds Rosicrucian to me. It sounds almost like there's the Amorc, AMORC, which is Ancient Mystic Order of Rosicrucians.
All close, yeah.
So I don't know if it's some sort of Rosicrucian thing, or I could be totally, I don't know. It's just something I noticed. Possibly, who knows?
It could be. I don't know. Whenever I see like something like that without vowels, I just think about like the Torah and the ancient Aramaic and Hebrew and how they would drop the vowels, and how they could write just using consonants and things like that without actually using vowels, and you could basically use those types of letters without interchangeably. They can mean a number of different things, depending on the actual context.
MRC. When you say MRC, it kind of sounds like you're saying mercy too. I don't know if that's
mercy. Yeah, that's
mercy.
interesting as well. Yeah, and it's funny. It's funny that you bring the concept of mercy, because one of the things that struck me, and this, I don't know if this is maybe a little bit off topic in terms of what we had planned to discuss today, but
no problem.
Well, one of the sort of topics that really, one of the observations I made, at least when I was watching this film, was that we have a situation here where it is absolute slavery. I mean, we literally have the world is run. The world and Elysium are both run by a gigantic computer system, which runs a series of probably thousands, maybe millions of these robot droids that keep the public in line. And that you can't even speak to a human being. You know what I mean? I mean, even there's a scene where Matt Damon goes to see his parole officer, and he's basically a parole officer is like a robot that's just giving him these program responses. And basically, it's the most obvious, disgusting form of slavery that anyone could ever imagine, and of disparity and of inequality that you could possibly imagine. People living in absolute luxury and literal immortality in the heavens, with the rest of us, living down on the planet, in absolute poverty and ruin, again, that gets back to, if you look into some of Plato's theories and metaphysics, it ties right back into that too. The reincarnation of souls, of the higher souls up to the Elysium, where the lower souls would stay behind on Earth and have to work their way up, but it basically, the point I wanted to make is, you mentioned the word mercy, and regardless of how obvious the slavery is, and how obvious the inequality is, and how obviously people are being exploited and enslaved and subjugated and used and abused, you've still got in Elysium basically like this bureaucracy, and this is why the Jodie Foster character wants to take over in the first place, because she sees him as being weak, and she's like a hard-type military, no-nonsense woman, like Hillary Clinton, like we said before. But but even then, in this situation, when things are so obviously unfair and so obviously unequal, and there's such a lack of equity in the world, it's to a level that most of us can't even comprehend, we still have a bunch of bureaucrats who are sitting around twiddling their pens, thinking about how can we make ourselves look nice? How can we justify this to the public? Oh, we don't want to use hitmen. When they've got robots down there killing people for making a slightest little joke. You literally, you don't get any food, you don't get any health care. If you don't take huge risks at work, you lose your job. The only thing you've got is crime or manual labor. It's absolute hell for the average person. And yet at the same time, you've got these people up on the space station talking about, we can't kill them. Oh dear, no, that would be nasty. We need to be nice, and we need to be fair, and we don't want to shoot down these refugees who are trying to cross the border. We want to gently get our robots to take them back up down to earth and deposit them there where they belong. Because it's just, I just found that incredible that at this point in time, 150 years in the future, where there's such inequality and such a disturbing level of inequity and of subjugation, that we still have this farce of a bureaucracy, up there saying, trying to pretend like, this is the natural order of things, and this is the way things just ended up, and it's unfortunate that you poor souls are still down there, but it's just the way things are. We're doing our best to help you, and we're doing our best to be fair to you, and we don't want to kill you, and it's like a magnanimous, godly attitude, and so it ties right back into some of the ideas we were talking about before, with these people consider themselves as basically gods, and the whole idea of Elysium basically being a religion, and then with Jodie Foster as the goddess, so to speak, and Matt Damon as the sun god, both who make a sacrifice for the greater good in their own ways, even though they had different causes, so. Yeah, I noticed that theme very prevalently. I thought that was very, very interesting that they made a point of showing that despite the situation, despite how obvious it was, they still actually made the effort to try and make it look like, oh, we're trying to make things better for you guys, and we want the best for you, but I'm sorry, this is just the natural order, and if you come up here, we'll take you back down to earth. We don't want to kill you, but even though that if they take them back down to earth, you basically sentencing them to a slow death. We'd never kill you. We'd never do that. We're nice people. And I just found that to be. I kind of found it to be kind of offensive, really. But I just thought I'd throw that in there and see what people thought about it. Did you?
Well, no, I definitely noticed that. I think it points to the fact that if there's an occult message going on here, probably the overall one is that this isn't about the future; it's about now. We've talked about that quite a bit, but I think that's the overarching occult message: is that, hey, look, this is how things are now. What do you, the viewer, think about this? I think that's the number one occult theme here.
Yeah, and of course, getting people to. Getting generations of all ages, to accept the idea that this whole thing is possible, or at least, probable or inevitable or whatever it may be, that this is the way things are going to go in the future. And so little kids will watch it, and people of our age will watch it, and people who are older will watch it. And the expectations and the little comments they make will be passed down from father to son and from father to son and from generation to generation. And through watching this film and through accepting these ideas, we are literally creating our own reality, because through accepting them, as you said before, perception is reality. And so if we perceive the world as being this way, through reading things like the DC Strat Trends report and the NBIC report, and saying, right, this is their plan, this is going to happen, and then through watching these films and being acclimated and psychologically familiarized with these concepts, i.e. predictive programming, in a way we are actually creating our own future.
Yeah.
Inadvertently, not on purpose perhaps, but it's almost a tight spot they've got us in there, because we have although we're observing the fact that we are being programmed to accept it, at the same time it hasn't stopped the programming. We've still been programmed to accept it.
Yeah, and that's the point of this podcast series, Themes and Memes, is to get you to think about this, to think about what you're watching, so that you don't become a passive viewer, but you become an active participant in what's going on. And that's you'll see that message in a lot of movies too. It's like, hey, you too could be an active participant here. What are you going to choose to do? So we always have a choice. So I hope that listeners are out there making the correct choices in their lives to make things change. And is there anything you want to end the show on here, Adam?
No, I mean, there's probably tons of stuff that I'll hit myself in the morning and go, damn, I forgot to say that. That's always going to be the case with these interviews, and we can't jam everything in. And I'll no doubt, remember something in a few days' time that I wish I'd mentioned. But hey, that's just the way it goes. We can never get everything perfect and everything right, and there's always going to be stuff that we wish we'd mentioned. There's always going to be stuff that other people picked up on that they think we should have mentioned. But hey, we're just doing the best we can, because I mean it's such a big film like Cloud Atlas that you could go on for hours. You could do 10 interviews on this and still be still have some to go. You know what I mean? There's so many different directions you can go on with this that it doesn't matter how long we talk about it. There's always going to be more to talk about, especially as you watch the film for maybe a third or a second time.
Absolutely, yeah.
What about you? Did you have anything else to add?
No, I think that'll do it for this episode of Themes and Memes. I think we should just let people know that. Again, I'm Aaron Franz. My website is The Age of Transitions. Why don't you give your website out too there?
Well, I'm Adam Roscoe, formerly of the Glasgow Truth Group. People may be familiar with that. And my new website is www.cerebralrevolt.com. And as I've mentioned in previous interviews, it's still basically just a holding page up now. There's not very much there because I'm still learning how to build a website, which is quite a chore. But I'm basically hoping to have it up in, sort of early next year. I've got a lot going on right now. I've got a hell of a lot on my plate, and so I'm not pushing myself too hard. But my goal is to have a fairly decent functional website up by sort of like January maybe. Yeah. So if people can just bookmark that and maybe check back, on a regular basis. I will be, of course, working on it, between now and then, but I'm hoping to have it to where I want it to be in a couple of months' time, basically. So, yeah.
Yeah, anybody interested in listening to Themes and Memes, this will be a continuing podcast series. We do one of these a month, new movie typically every month, where we talk along these angles. We